HOA sent workers with guns. My champion bull never walked back to the barn. You don't raise an animal like Duke by accident. He wasn't just a bull, he was the bloodline. His sire won the Houston Grand Rodeo in 2012. His dam came from the last lineage of Black Angus, traced directly back to Texas pioneer stock. I trained him from a calf, and we built this place, Branford Acres, together. My name's Ellis Branford, third-generation rancher, ex-foreman of the Tyler Stock Union. I walked away from corporate ag 10 years ago to raise cattle the way my grandfather did on open pasture, with hands in the dirt and eyes on the horizon. I never once imagined I'd lose it all to a woman with a clipboard. Her name was Karen Stonemeyer. She lived a mile east in the newly developed tract they called Whispering Meadows, where folks sipped sparkling water and voted on lawn lengths. I wasn't in their HOA. Legally, I was exempt, but that didn't stop her from trying to rope us in. And when I said no, she called it noncompliance. I called it trespass. But that was before she sent her field cleanup team through my north gate, and one of them shot my bull dead. You don't forget the sound. It wasn't the shot that stays with me. It was the silence right after the kind that grips the world and squeezes out every other noise. The birds stopped. The wind died. And then the earth groaned like it knew something sacred had just been ripped from it. That was the day they shot Duke. He wasn't just a bull. He was the last of the Branford line. My name's Ellis Branford, 48, rancher, widower. I live with my younger sister, Ruthie, and we run Branford Acres just west of San Jacinto County. 80 acres, open pasture, and enough sweat poured into the soil to raise 3 full herds and a legacy I'd stake my life on. Duke was born 5 years ago during the worst spring storm we'd seen since '93. We found him lying in the muck near the lower paddock, shaking like a leaf, barely breathing. Ruthie wrapped him in her own jacket, and I carried him into the barn in the middle of a damn lightning strike. He made it, strong, proud, tempered by the storm. We never bred him for beef. Duke was for bloodline, for shows, for the kind of heritage that built this land. Folks from 3 states came to see him last year at the Trinity Rodeo. He took top prize, carried himself like royalty in a pen of mutts. He was never aggressive, never kicked, never charged, until the morning he was shot for grazing in his own field. It started 2 months back, when the new HOA popped up across County Line Road. They called themselves the Whispering Meadows Community Preservation Committee, but it was just a few retired realtors and lawyers who thought property lines were suggestions. Karen Stonemeyer led the charge. Early 50s, iced blonde bob, polyester windbreaker with WMCPA stitched where a sheriff's badge might have gone. She came up my drive in a Lexus with a magnet sign that said Compliance Outreach Vehicle. I wanted to speak about visual cohesion. She said, "You're on private land." I told her, "We've had concerns about your overgrowth," she said, stepping out with a clipboard. "Your north pasture is visible from several member properties. The tall weeds, disorganized fencing, and untagged livestock could create negative aesthetic and property value impacts." I laughed. Loud. The kind of laugh that comes from the belly and dares someone to try you. This is a working cattle ranch. Ain't here for show. You don't own 1 inch of this land. She stiffened. "We're expanding our covenant map. You try enforcing that. I'll call the sheriff." She gave me a tight smile. Non-cooperation has consequences. That was the first visit. There would be 5 more. Ruthie begged me to install cameras. I didn't. That's my mistake. I figured if someone stepped foot past my fence, they'd meet Duke first. Turns out, they met him last, the day it happened. I was at the feed store, picking up a pallet of high-protein cubes. Ruthie was home, planting near the south lot. She told me later she heard the voices, then the gate creak, then a shout, "Get it back, get it back." Then came the shot. She ran barefoot across the yard, phone in hand, but they were gone by the time she reached the fence line. Just tire tracks in the grass. And Duke, lying near the cedar tree where he used to scratch his horns. He was still breathing when I got home. Barely. I wrapped his head in my arms and whispered every word I could remember from childhood prayers. But he died with his eye locked on mine. quiet, steady, like he forgave me. The sheriff came. He took photos, found a casing, .308 Winchester, said it came from a hunting rifle. We both knew it wasn't an accident. There were no game animals on my land. No deer, no coyotes, just cattle, and only one bull. That night, Ruthie found a folded piece of paper under our front gate, WMCPA Notice of Preliminary Grounds Cleanup. Per Article 6C of the Meadow Covenant Extension Plan, field volunteers conducted overgrowth correction on visible properties impacting member views. We regret any accidental harm done in the process. Property owners may file a compensation request with our committee clerk. They called it accidental harm. They shot my bull and left a damn form letter. I marched straight to the HOA clubhouse the next morning. Karen met me on the front steps like she'd been waiting. She had on that same windbreaker, a clipboard in hand, and two guys in neon vests standing behind her like bodyguards. "Miss Branford, we deeply regret," I shoved the letter into her chest. "You sent people onto my land. Our volunteers misunderstood the boundary. No, you gave them a map and told them to clean up my ranch." She looked around like we were on camera. "Let's not get dramatic. My bull's blood is still in the dirt." One of the men stepped forward, hand hovering near his belt like he thought he could intimidate me. Bad move. I locked eyes with him. "You got something to say?" He looked away. Karen held her ground. "We're willing to offer you $2,500 for the loss. As a courtesy." I stared at her like she'd just offered me a pack of gum for my mother's headstone. "Duke was worth 60 grand, I said, "and no price brings him back." She blinked. "It's not about money, no. It's about control. You tried to strong-arm your way across the fence, and now you're going to find out why some lines shouldn't be crossed." That night, I filed police reports. Every shred of paper they ever left on my gate. The footage from a neighbor's trail cam that caught the white pickup truck exiting my property 40 minutes before Duke died. Then I made a call to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. His name's Tomas, used to be the top livestock claims adjuster in the state. Left after a whistleblower scandal involving forged tags and illegal culls. Now he runs a rural justice network, small but connected. He came out the next morning, looked at the body, the tracks, the casing. "This wasn't a mistake," he said. "This was a warning." And I knew then Karen hadn't just killed my bull. She was trying to break something far more dangerous than a fence line. She was trying to break me. When a man loses a bloodline animal, it's not just grief, it's legacy collapse. The first thing I did after Duke's burial was walk every inch of my property, every gate, every post, every stretch of barbed wire. I wasn't just looking for tracks, I was reminding myself that this land was still mine. But something had changed. I could feel it in the quiet, like the land itself was waiting on me to fight back. Tomas stayed the night after his inspection. We sat on the porch drinking bitter black coffee while Ruthie made calls from the kitchen. She was rallying folks. Word had spread fast. They shot Ellis Branford's bull. Those 6 words reached 3 counties in under 12 hours. The sheriff called me the next day. "Ellis, I've got folks calling my office demanding we arrest Karen Stonemeyer, but legally we can't touch her." Yet, I gritted my teeth. "You waiting on a second bull, I'm waiting on evidence. Brother, something that proves intent." Tomas leaned toward the receiver. "What if we have that?" The sheriff paused. "Talk." Tomas explained he'd done a trace on the bullet casing. It matched a custom rifle owned by one of Karen's volunteers, a man named Greg Halpern, who once got booted from a hunting club for overstepping boundary limits. He also happened to be Karen's cousin. That wasn't coincidence. That was conspiracy, and it got deeper. Ruthie found a Google Drive shared from a WMCPA email with a document titled Perimeter Development Recommendations. Inside were maps, photos, even a projected fence realignment proposal with my land absorbed into a communal livestock expansion corridor. They weren't just trying to scare me. They were laying the foundation to take my land. I brought the folder to Sheriff Darnell myself, his brow furrowed deeper with every page. "They're preparing to redistrict land that isn't even under their jurisdiction," I said. He shook his head. This goes beyond petty HOA garbage. This is real estate fraud and maybe racketeering, but you still can't move on it. Not yet, he admitted. But give me one more thread to pull and I'll unravel this whole fake empire. The thread came from someone unexpected. Rick Monroe, local electrician, war vet, and my neighbor to the west. He pulled up in his rusted Dodge and handed me an envelope. She tried to find me. He said my fencing wires were unsightly and violated HOA code. Gave me this in person. Said I had until Friday or I'd be reported to zoning enforcement. But you're not in their HOA, I said. He spat on the ground. Ain't never been. But she said they're expanding jurisdiction based on visual cohesion rights. Whatever the hell that means. Inside the envelope, a typed violation letter. But the letterhead wasn't from WMCPA. It said Texas Code Consolidated Regional Property Standards Division. A total fake department. She's forging state-level documents, Ruthie said flatly. And that was the thread. Tomas made the call to the Attorney General's Rural Affairs Liaison, then to an investigative journalist in Austin who'd been tracking illegal HOA expansions across Texas. By that Friday, an official state inquiry had been opened. Karen didn't know yet, but she was being watched. Meanwhile, I gathered my allies, Rick, Ruthie, Tomas, Yolanda from the animal sanctuary across the creek. Even old man Griggs, who hadn't left his house in 6 months, showed up in a lawn chair by my fence with a bat across his knees. We watching the pasture, he said. You watched the gate. It wasn't just defense, it was defiance. But Karen, she doubled down. Monday morning, 4 white trucks with HOA logos rolled into the county. They stopped just outside my southern boundary line. Men climbed out with clipboards and rolled maps. One carried a drone. They didn't cross the fence, not yet, but they stood there for hours, watching, measuring, logging. One even pointed at Duke's grave. That's when Ruthie lost it. She marched straight to the fence, face red as wildfire. You get that thing off my brother's land before I feed it to the shredder. They didn't respond. She picked up a rock and launched it. The drone spun, beeped, then zipped away like a mosquito on fire. Rick clapped from the porch. That's my kind of diplomacy. That night, I hosted a meeting at the barn. No suits, no cameras, just neighbors and truth. I laid everything out, the forged maps, the emails, the bullet trace, the drone harassment. I don't care what HOA you're from. I said, you don't get to shoot livestock, fake your way through state documents, and call it community beautification. Someone in the back shouted, let's shut them down. Tomas stepped up. We don't need to fight dirty. We fight smart. We push this story. We shine a light so bright the termites have nowhere left to hide. And we did. The next morning, Yolanda posted the drone video online. The footage showed my land, Duke's grave, the trucks, the men with guns, all of it time-stamped. Within 24 hours, the video had 1.8 million views. News crews showed up. State investigators arrived in unmarked vans, and Karen Shee held a press conference. We were merely executing a volunteer-based landscaping review, she said, standing in front of a pastel HOA banner. Any harm caused was purely accidental. Our only goal is to beautify our beloved community. She smiled wide, then turned to walk off stage only to find Sheriff Darnell waiting with a folder of documents. No comment, he asked. Her smile twitched, and the storm rolled in. They say justice moves slow in rural towns, but when it comes, it moves like thunder. The day after Sheriff Darnell handed Karen that folder, the whole town held its breath. Nobody said her name out loud, like it might summon something worse. But everybody knew the wind had shifted. Karen didn't fold right away. No, she went full storm. She called an emergency covenant summit in the Whispering Meadows clubhouse, inviting every HOA member, volunteer, and neighbor concerned with the spread of misinformation and civil disorder. She had refreshments, a PowerPoint, even balloons. But what she didn't expect was a leak. Ruthie got a call from a woman named Dana, mid-30s, single mom, HOA bookkeeper. She'd followed the HOA rules blindly until Duke died. I didn't sign up to kill livestock, she said, her voice shaking. I didn't sign up to harass veterans or lie to state offices. I've seen the documents. Ruthie, you were right. She's planning a land grab. Can you prove it? Ruthie asked. There was silence. Then a ping, a shared folder. Whispering Meadows expansion plan, confidential. Inside handwritten notes labeling Branford Acres as Tier 1 redevelopment. A budget estimate for fencing installation across targeted open lots. A memo titled Managing Rural Resistance Tactics for HOA Messaging. That last one chilled me to the bone. It used words like isolate, discredit, and neutralize community disruption. I wasn't a neighbor to her. I was a threat. We printed everything. Tomas called his contacts at the state AG's office. Ruthie called every local paper from San Jacinto to Houston. I made a call of my own to a man I'd only met once, but who owed me a favor. Captain Joel Barnes of the Texas Agricultural Bureau. He remembered Duke, that black Angus with the silver blaze. Yeah, he's dead. Say no more. The public hearing was held under the old courthouse rotunda. Wood beams, marble floors, full capacity. Karen showed up in a white blouse and pencil skirt, her makeup perfect, her hair in a slick bun like a realtor about to pitch beachfront property. I wore jeans, boots, and a flannel stained with fence paint. My sister wore Duke's show ribbon pinned to her collar. The hearing opened with the state investigator reading out loud the names of each fake department Karen had invented. Texas Code Consolidated, Regional Property Standards, Southland Livestock Oversight, all fraudulent, all stamped and signed by Karen or her volunteers. Then came the drone video, then the bullet trace. Then they brought up Dana, the HOA bookkeeper. She walked to the front, hands shaking, and read from Karen's own notes. Property owners resisting HOA alignment should be painted as unstable, uncooperative, or mentally unwell, especially if they own livestock. File nuisance reports, if provoked, capture footage, and call local authorities to escalate response. Make them the threat. The room gasped. Someone shouted, "You tried to get that man locked up." Karen stood up. "This is taken out of context." The investigator turned to her calmly. "Then please explain why you coordinated armed volunteers to cross onto Mr. Branford's land without any legal jurisdiction." Her lip twitched. They misunderstood the boundary. It was not armed enforcement, it was visual compliance oversight. Tomas chuckled loudly. Visual compliance. You had men with guns pointing at cows. The hearing ended with the state issuing a cease and desist against Whispering Meadows Community Preservation Association. All operations suspended, pending criminal review. Karen didn't go home. She went straight to a lawyer. And still, she didn't give up. 2 days later, someone cut my south fence. I woke to 4 of my steers wandering the road. Ruthie found a fresh tire track leading off the gravel. No one saw who did it, but we all knew. Then Yolanda's goats disappeared. Then the church mailbox was smashed. Karen had lost control of the narrative, but she hadn't lost her grip on the people willing to fight dirty for her. So I made a choice. I called a town hall meeting, only this time. We held it in the open field where Duke had died. We set up chairs, a generator, a speaker system, and the people came. Over 200 showed up. Farmers, vets, teenagers, grandmothers. The air was heavy, humid, but electric. I buried my bull right over there. I said, pointing past the cedar, his name was Duke. He never harmed a soul, and he died because someone wanted control more than community. I held up Karen's expansion map. She didn't just want this land. She wanted to erase us from it. But that ends now. I stepped aside as Ruthie read names every person fined, threatened, or trespassed against. Then Dana read aloud Karen's private memos. Then Tomas announced what we'd all been waiting to hear. The state has opened a criminal inquiry, and we've submitted formal charges for fraud, trespassing, forgery, animal cruelty, and more. That night, we held a candlelight vigil at Duke's grave. Micah, Yolanda's son, laid a flower wreath. Rick played guitar. Even the sheriff came, hat in hand. and said quietly, "Sorry it took this much." I nodded. "Just don't let it happen again." The next morning, Karen was arrested, charged with 9 counts, held on a $250,000 bond. Her HOA charter was dissolved. All her volunteers were served with civil suits, and my land, it stayed mine. The morning they took Karen in, the entire street was lined with lawn chairs. No one clapped, no one cheered, but they watched stone-faced, some holding coffee, others just standing barefoot in their yards as the woman who ruled over Whispering Meadows like a queen pin was marched into a sheriff's SUV in zip ties and pearls. She didn't scream, didn't cry, just looked forward like the cameras weren't there. Like none of this was real, but it was. And I was standing 10 feet away when they closed the door on her fake empire. The aftermath came fast. The state seized all HOA documents and froze their accounts. Investigators combed through property maps, payment ledgers, forged fines, and drone footage that showed clear and willful trespassing. A dozen other community members came forward, including one couple who claimed Karen tried to reclassify their front lawn as part of a planned park project without their consent. What shocked me most was just how many people knew and said nothing, out of fear or shame. But when Duke died, that changed everything. I thought it would be over once she was gone. But systems don't vanish overnight, especially ones built on fear. People still asked me, quietly, if it was okay to repaint their porch. I told them, "You don't need permission to live free." 1 week later, I got a letter in the mail. Certified, no return address, inside a typewritten apology. I didn't know they'd shoot him. I swear I didn't. I just thought it would scare you into negotiating. I wanted the land, but I never wanted blood. I'm sorry. Ellis. No signature. But I knew it was her. The phrasing, the rhythm, the cowardice masquerading as remorse. Ruthie wanted to burn it. I kept it. Not for forgiveness, for evidence, for closure. But something strange happened in the weeks after. Neighbors started stopping by, not just to gossip, but to help. A group of teenagers from the community college came to repaint our barn no charge. Yolanda sent over 2 bottle-fed calves to help rebuild the herd. Rick installed motion sensors at every gate, refused payment. Even folks who once backed Karen donated to a community fund Ruthie set up called the Duke Line Legacy for therapy animals, ag students, and families rebuilding after HOA overreach. Meanwhile, the state brought 10 formal charges against Karen: fraudulent governance, trespassing, unlawful surveillance, animal cruelty, forgery, criminal impersonation, conspiracy to commit harassment, intent to defraud through real estate misrepresentation, tampering with public records, unauthorized armed activity on private property. They offered her a plea: 5 years, no parole, $400 or $1,000 restitution to affected residents. She took it. Her face disappeared from Whispering Meadows, but her name lingered like smoke after a barn fire. People avoided using it. They said her, or the lady with the clipboard, or just that whole mess. But I didn't forget. I wouldn't, because Duke still wasn't in the pasture. 3 months later, we held a memorial, not just for the bull, but for the damage, for the trauma, for the illusion of safety that fake power had shattered. Over 400 people came. Ranchers, HOA whistleblowers from other counties, even an Austin state rep who promised new legislation to protect rural landowners from fake jurisdiction. We built a wooden arch over Duke's grave, carved his name. Underneath it, Micah, Ruthie, and I painted the words, "Some fences protect, others divide. Know the difference." Ruthie said something at the vigil that stuck with me. "We don't need someone watching over us. We need someone watching with us." And she was right. Tomas helped draft a bill proposal, the Branford Act, protecting non-HOA residents from unsolicited enforcement actions, drone surveillance, or land reclassification without full county approval. It passed in 3 counties. Now it's moving toward the state level. That's how we win. Not just by burying tyrants, but by planting something stronger in their place. We rebuilt the fence first. Not because we had to, but because we wanted to. Every post, every wire, every corner stretched with more care than it ever had before. Ruthie called it a memorial fence, something solid to wrap around the wound and say, "This land still stands." We stained the top board deep red. That's how you know which side you're on. Spring came slow that year. The earth thawed like it wasn't sure if it was ready to grow again. But the land did heal because the people finally stood together. The HOA disbanded for good. The Whispering Meadows Clubhouse was repurposed into a rural outreach center, funded partly by restitution from Karen's sentence, and partly by donations that poured in after the story went national. Not just from Texas, but from California, Tennessee, even Vermont. People wrote in, "I lost my beehives to a rogue HOA. My grandpa's shed got demolished because of a noise complaint he was deaf. Thank you for standing up, for showing us we can too." Karen served 6 months before being transferred to a lower security restitution program. Last I heard, she was working community labor in East Texas, painting fence lines and sorting recyclables under county watch. They say she still tries to supervise. Some people don't change, but the town did. In May, we hosted the first Duke Line Legacy Fair. No pageants, no ribbons, just families, animals, food, and a community that remembered what earned respect looked like. Tomas gave a talk on land rights. Yolanda held a workshop on livestock therapy. The sheriff walked his new bloodhound, letting kids pet it and explaining how laws don't mean much unless the people behind them care. And Ruthie, she spoke softly into the mic, holding Micah's hand. As the wind rustled the oaks above us, Duke didn't die for nothing. He showed us what happens when fear wears a uniform. He reminded us to speak up, even when it shakes. And this fence behind me, she touched the red board. It's not to keep people out. It's to remind us where the truth begins. We gave away 12 calves that day to new 4-H kids. Micah led them to the pens, naming each one carefully. Spark, Promise, River, Justice. He still visits Duke's grave every Sunday. Not to cry, not anymore. Just to sit, to whisper things, to remember. He told me once, "I think Duke would have liked what we're doing now." I think he's right. The legislature passed the Branford Act statewide by September. Every HOA in Texas had to submit new boundary certifications. Any enforcement action now requires verified legal jurisdiction or faces a $50 fine. Drone surveillance over private property without owner consent felony. Karen's blueprint had become her undoing, and our map forward. I walk the fields most mornings now, coffee in hand, boots worn, land quiet. Sometimes I see the shadow of a black bull by the cedar, where the wind cuts low and the grass bends a certain way. But I'm not haunted. I'm reminded. That legacy doesn't live in barns or ribbons or titles. It lives in what we protect and who we stand up for. Have you ever been pushed around by a voice louder than yours as a neighbor, bored, or authority overstepped because they thought they could share your story? Speak your line, draw your boundary, because justice isn't a favor we're given. It's a fence we build together.